All right, today we are talking zero trust security, what many are saying is the new standard in cybersecurity. And to talk me through it, because I definitely don't know much, is Masaki Takeda from the Instillery. Let's get stuck in. So Masaki, today we're talking about zero trust security. I'm going to need you to talk to me like I am a small child because I really don't understand anything when it comes to zero trust, of note at least. But let's actually start with, what does a typical day look like for a network delivery manager at the Instillery?
Number of different, networking projects from our side. Some of it is deploying Zscaler projects, but also we get involved in SD-WAN, cloud networking. So connecting, helping organizations connect to cloud environments, whether it's Azure, AWS, Google Cloud, but also building the cloud network for the customer in preparation for their cloud migrations, moving workloads into the cloud. Helping organizations connect to cloud environments, whether it's Azure, AWS, Google Cloud, but also building the cloud network for the customer in preparation for their cloud migrations, moving workloads into the cloud. So we work on number of different technologies, not just on-premise networking, but also cloud networking, cloud security as well.
Right. So where or when or both did you first come across the term zero trust security, given that's what we're here to talk about?
Yeah. So I think for us, it has been a natural progression, I think. So we've been working with SD-WAN for about, I think, just over 4 years now. So I would say we were one of the first, early adopters of SD-WAN. Being a cloud company, it was quite natural for us to move into the whole SD-WAN industry. For us, we didn't really have an MPLS in the past. We went straight into SD-WAN, and we've been working with the technology for a while.
Who was the first vendor you guys used for your SD-WAN play?
Yeah, so we traditionally used Meraki and Riverbed. So Riverbed was one of our, I guess we had a tiered approach. Riverbed was our enterprise SD-WAN offering at a earlier on, and Cisco Meraki we still do for SMB customers.
And what have you moved to in the enterprise space now? Because I think you guys have moved to VeloCloud, haven't you?
That's right, yeah. So we now partner with VMware or VeloCloud or VMware for our enterprise SD-WAN offering.
And what do they do that's different? What have they got that provides a bit of that special sauce?
Yeah, I mean, if you look on the internet, VMware SD-WAN is highly regarded, and I think there's a number of reasons for that. They are, I guess, a purposely built technology. So they've been an SD-WAN vendor for, I think, just over 7 years now. And if you look at different features, SD-WAN features, I mean, that's what they specialize in. But then they have all these advanced features that you don't really get from some of the other vendors. So things like dynamic routing is quite important, right? Being able to integrate with legacy WAN. So especially if you're migrating from your MPLS to SD-WAN, you still want to be able to do things like BGP routing. You want to be able to influence path. Not many SD-WAN vendors offer that, but yeah, VeloCloud, you can do, dynamic routing, BGP, OSPF. But then it's the application awareness, being able to prioritize application based on what's important for your business. Are you a big 365 user? So how do you go about prioritizing that traffic over maybe video streaming? So being able to pick and choose what application to prioritize, but also the amount of visibility that we get from the platform. And probably one of the biggest one was ease of use. So we co-manage our SD-WAN solutions with our customers. So we didn't want a platform where we have to configure and manage things through CLI, for example, because the whole SD-WAN story is software defined. It should just be able to do it through the GUI. It should be nice and easy. That was one of our biggest requirements, is to have a easy platform that we can deploy and manage with our customers. And Velo did that really well. It's a fully cloud managed solution. It's powerful. It's quite simple to navigate around.
And what are their price points like? Because I know for any other MSPs are looking to evaluate options. The features are one very important part of the puzzle, but then there's the price points as well. So yeah, how do they stack up?
Yeah, I mean, we were actually quite surprised initially. We somehow perceived VeloCloud being an enterprise vendor. We thought they were going to be quite expensive, I guess. But if you actually talk to them and look at their price points, they actually stack up against essentially all of the other SD-WAN vendors. So yeah.
Right. Well, instead of putting you on the spot there and asking you to break a whole bunch of NDAs, I will ask you to define zero trust security for me, because I know, well, the little that I know is that instead of the old days where it was trust people inside the network and no one outside of it, now it's much more of a don't trust anyone to do anything from anywhere. Can you just run me through how far from accurate that is?
So I think firstly, zero trust. It's a term that's been adopted widely now. Different vendors. I think zero trust means differently to a number of different vendors. It has become a bit confusing, I think. I think if you kind of peel it back and, like you talked about, the whole zero trust for us is really looking at access to your applications, kind of removing the network aspect from it. So how do you provide users access to your applications securely without having to rely on your network? So that's how we really see zero trust. But then we kind of got to look at different use cases as well. User to application access might be easy for your normal corporate environment. But what does zero trust mean for things like OT networks? You can't really adopt the same model in an OT environment, for example. So yeah, I think for us, zero trust doesn't necessarily mean one thing. It's just looking at different use cases and how do we adopt the theory of having least privileged access is how we adopt zero trust.
Okay, so school me on that. Least privileged access means what in real terms?
Yeah, so I guess if you look at the history of WAN, we had the MPLS WAN, which traditionally worked on a trust model, right? So you had a network, everything inside was trusted, everything outside was untrusted. So you kind of built this perimeter around your network, and you essentially trusted everything inside, whether that's your servers, your corporate devices, your users. A lot of that's now changed with your users working remotely. Your applications are now in the cloud. So it's really looking at, I guess, turning it upside down and looking at, your network's no longer secure. So how do we go about actually securing your users and your network access, your application access? So for us, it's really bringing it down to the device level. So not just controlling access based on, network to network, but looking at, okay, how do we provide application access to your devices directly? So, I mean, what we can do with things like some of the vendor technologies that we work with, like Zscaler, it's you bring that application all the way down to your users. So you have an agent on your machine, and what you can do is you can let the agent decide. You can let the agent forward your traffic to the likes of secure web gateway for all of your internet-based traffic, but also for your internal applications directly from the device. And we utilize the cloud security platform Zscaler to do that. So if let's say you're on your computer, you're browsing the internet, 365, for example, Office 365, all of that traffic then gets forwarded onto your secure web gateway where all of the inspection through protection happens. But then if you're accessing your internal applications, you then get brokered through secure access gateway for your internal applications, whether that's your on-premise data center or your cloud. So essentially your access, whether you're going out to the internet or your internal resources, you get brokered through the cloud platforms, cloud security platforms. But it means you're connecting to those directly from your device. So you no longer require network access to whether that's your internet or your internal applications. And this works well because essentially this is the model that a lot of companies are adopting for remote work. Now that a lot of your remote workforce are at home, outside, they're utilizing things like remote access solutions to be able to get access to your internal corporate applications. But then if you take the same approach if you're on premise, experience is the same. You have the same level of control. So your network essentially becomes your corporate network. You can treat it almost as your as a guest network. Really, all that needs access to is internet. So from a networking standpoint, it becomes quite simple to manage. So you no longer have to worry too much about network security in a way.
Which is interesting, right? Because at a time when the threats that we're facing are more complex than ever, what you're saying is it's getting simpler to manage through the zero trust approach, because you don't have to worry about certain users having certain access based on a certain location or certain applications. It's just a universal approach to each user.
Mm-hmm. That's it. Yeah. I mean, trying to secure the network, unfortunately, has become very complex, especially in this day and age. So, certainly for customers with, as I talked about earlier, there might be customers who still require strong network security requirements. OT networks, customers who runs factory, you'll still likely need a level of network security, but unfortunately it's very complex to manage. How do you segment the network? How do you secure the ports? You can use things like network access control to do that, but it's not so easy to manage. And if you're trying to adopt that same model for corporate network as well, you're kind of making it more complex. Your complexity level of trying to manage security across your network goes up. If you take the different approach of, let's just not allow anything through your network, it does become, the whole model of trying to manage security becomes a lot simpler.
Right. And, where there's complexity, there's opportunity though, right? Because I know, going back, and maybe this is something I can get in Michael Russell, your CEO, to talk about with me one day, but I know when he was running Origin IT, they merged with the Instillery. A big part of the focus for the Instillery at that point was to get that SOC capability that Origin IT had running, because as this space is more complex, it's going to keep evolving. The need for companies to look for that support externally is just going through the roof. So that was a big part of the strategic vision for you guys. Right. So I know you guys work with Zscaler. They were kind of first to market with that whole zero trust approach as a cloud-based security platform. A lot of other entities now have come to the market, whether it's Palo Alto, Cloudflare, others. How have you seen the market in that space evolve?
Yeah, so you're right. I think Zscaler was one of the first ones to be adopting the whole zero trust network access. Like I said, though, there are, zero trust doesn't necessarily mean one thing, especially with different vendors adopting the whole zero trust. The different vendors trying to adopt zero trust into their, product portfolio. But yeah, we are starting to definitely hear a lot more around zero trust being talked about from different vendors.
Right. And you say that the term zero trust means different things to different vendors, but how wide is that variance in your view?
It is really wide. I've heard of some, zero trust vendors who refer to zero trust as, not letting anything into your network, so very network focused. Our view is very software oriented. Depending on who you talk to, different companies have different view on zero trust, and I think that's what kind of complicates the whole conversation around zero trust. Is depending on who you talk to, it could potentially mean different things. But I think for us, like we initially said, it's really trying to simplify the network security. Is trying to simplify access to your applications from your users, improving user experience. But really looking at how can we adopt a network that's secure by design, really. Yeah, so for us, that's what that's what zero trust.
So paint me a picture, like maybe using an example that you've run with in a Zscaler zero trust deployment. I'm thinking here, one of your large scale deployments in New Zealand, maybe a city council, for example.
Yeah.
What was the before versus after comparison like? What was in real terms, both for the end user and the network perspective? What did it look like before versus afterwards?
Yeah, so I think I'll take probably one of the financial institute that we worked with recently as an example. Essentially, they had an MPLS type network where they had router on site, they had a data center, and everything on the network between the sites and the data center was trusted. There was no real firewalling in between. So if you're on branch A, trying to talk to branch B or into the data center, essentially anyone can come in, connect to the network, and get access to your corporate resources or any devices on the network.
Okay.
So what we had done for them is rolled out the Zscaler solution, and essentially the corporate network now, what it looks like is almost like a guest network, internet cafe. So you connect to the corporate Wi-Fi, you patch into the corporate network. All you get access to is the internet. That's all you get access to, nothing else. So you can't physically plug into your network and get access to your servers, for example. That's defined at the SD-WAN level. And then what we do is we then use the agent that we talked about on those devices, and using the Zscaler cloud to broker your access to the internet through Zscaler, but also for your internal applications, whether you're going to the on-prem DC. This particular customer is moving to the cloud. So essentially, if they're trying to get into the on-prem data center, your access to data center is brokered through the secure access gateway, but also the same applies to your Azure traffic as well. And all of the access is defined. So there's a granular policy that you set up on the cloud side. What the zero trust solution provides is a way to control access based on your user identity, but also applications. So you define users, applications, and you can then configure policy that says, if you're part of HR, you get access to HR applications. If you're part of IT, you get access to administrative access for your servers, your network equipment. So you get down to that granular level. That's what we talked about earlier around least privileged based access. So you don't, just because you're part of the organization, you don't get access to everything. You only get access to things that you need.
Right. Okay. Just decreasing that risk factor. Just when it comes to the actual end user devices, how aware are people, whether it's mobile or desktop, how aware are they that there is a client of some sort running on those devices?
Yeah. So I mean, it's unnoticeable for the users. These agents just sit in the background, doing its thing, really. So I think one of the, as we move into, digital transformation and modernizing network access, user experience is one of the key points that a lot of the vendors are focusing on. So it is important that, not having to log into things every single time that you want to access an application. Really these solutions are unnoticeable. So these agents are unnoticeable for the users for the most part.
Right. So none of the, logging into a VPN, putting in some sort of 2FA token. No, right. Yeah. No, it's something I know all too well. It's very, it's punishing. Yeah. When you have companies with employees using their own mobile phones, do you ever get pushback from them going, not letting the company put some client side or some sort of device on a phone that I own?
Yeah, good question. So there are agentless access options available for things like BYOD or even contractors. So there are other options available to give them access to your internal applications, and also you also want to enhance security. So you don't just want to provide them access because, that they're part of your IDP, because they have access to it. You don't potentially not want to give them access from all of the devices. You don't know what kind of devices they're using. If a device at home is just shared across all of your family members, you might not necessarily be accessing your servers, your applications. So there's lots of smarts built into these, I guess, the security platforms. So it's not just looking at who the users are, but it's actually looking at what the devices as well. Is it domain joined? Does it have antivirus installed? Has it got a particular certificate that it trusts?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because it's something I've been listening to people talk more about and hearing more about in the industry. So, just that, and I don't want to use the term AI necessarily because I think it's overdone and I have no idea whether I'm using it in the right way in this particular context, but that general awareness of the platforms to understand in real time that, perhaps this particular device isn't where it would typically be, for example, or a link has been shared that shouldn't typically be accessible by this particular other person. That type of real-time awareness of the platforms, is that something you see universally becoming just much more common?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. I think it's important. I mean, one of the benefit of these platform is it has all the smart, because it's all software defined, they have a lot of information that they can utilize to secure access. So things like locations, any information that the platform can gather about the user, about the device, they can use that information to further restrict access.
Yeah, it's pretty impressive that nowadays with the software being used, you can become aware of issues really before they're even a problem necessarily. Just that real time reaction. So, in the SD-WAN space, how have you seen the SD-WAN vendors evolve their offerings to factor in these zero trust applications that have become available as sort of standalone entities to really add to their own, unique selling proposition?
Yeah, I guess some of the vendors that we work with, I guess one of the key features of SD-WAN is their application awareness. So they have a team in the background actually looking at different application signatures and constantly building up these signatures in order for you to create policy, so forth. So yeah, it's very. If you kind of look at number of applications that are available on these platforms, it's growing continuously, and I guess that's probably one of the reasons why we chose our vendor that we work with, VMware, is by having a large number of applications that we can choose from in order to do like traffic prioritization, firewalling. They also have built quite a strong partnership and integration with companies like cloud security companies. So if you look at let's say VMware as an example, they have things like API-based integration in order for us to build these tunnels from edges directly to Zscaler. So what you can do is you can essentially route all of your internet-bound traffic to Zscaler from these edges by a couple of clicks of a button. That's all automated in the background to make it really easy and simple to deploy and secure the networks.
Right, and I guess from your point of view, that's a good thing because it means that some of the lower end networking team or the people in maybe less expensive roles in the company can handle a lot of those network changes because they're so intuitive, right? You don't need to have some senior network engineer making changes to the way an MPLS WAN is configured. So it just makes it, it's so intuitive that it makes the overheads much less than it would otherwise be.
Yeah, and that also means that we can also provide some of that control to the customers as well. So customers themselves can actually go in, have a look, change the traffic policies, change the firewall rules. It is that intuitive. Yeah.
So you guys have got this co-pilot strategy, right? But how do you balance the desire to give the client some control with the risk of them screwing it up?
Right.
Not that your clients
obviously
would.
This
I'm sure they're all,
our customers are really good, right? So
disclaimer made now, Dish.
Yeah. They have their own due diligence that they need to go through before making changes, and they often consult with us before making large scale change. We're kind of there to provide guidance and assistance for our customers. So simple changes they might be able to make on their own. If it's a large scale change, they'll normally come to us. We work together to come up with a plan and the implementation. So
okay, fair enough. Sounds like you've got a good balance there. Okay, so I think the last question for me is really just whether you've had any scenarios where the network that you're dealing with, the legacy network, is so complex or perhaps so archaic, or perhaps there's just some particular way in which a company is running its network or its branch offices that has actually precluded the ability for you to deploy a zero trust architecture.
Yeah, so I think I guess what we focused on it was mainly around user to application access. But yeah, if you look at let's say manufacturing business with large scale OT kind of networks, you can't really apply the same logic or the same model for these networks. So I guess if you look at how do we adopt a similar model for network heavy or for environment where network is required, but like wired connection is required. I guess where we take a different kind of approach for these particular customers. We don't necessarily rely heavily on software-defined solutions, but we look at how do you segment these networks. So we probably look a little bit more like an on-premise type environment, but it's about having good network security platforms to offer things like, okay, well, if you're allowing traffic between different OT networks, how do you go about applying IPS, IDS signatures that are OT specific? But also, if you're multi-site, how do you segment network between, let's say, site A, site B? So these scalar networks can talk to each other, but making sure that the corporate networks can gain access to your scalar networks. So I guess that's where, again, the enterprise-grade type SD-WAN solution is quite important in our view. So being able to do things like network segmentation across your WAN.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. I'm just thinking as well. So when we're talking a lot about users, but with the shift to kind of machine to machine connectivity, how does that change things in this space?
Yeah, so I guess what that machine comes down to, there are a lot of solutions that are coming out that provides, I guess, microsegmentation, which means using the server to server or device to device access. So I mean, some of these solutions might look like you put an agent on these servers, and these agents essentially control what server to server access can be allowed through. So some of these solutions have a discovery capability. You load the agent, you monitor the traffic for a while, let's say 3-4 weeks, and once you understand what kind of flow you're seeing across the network between the servers, you can then easily go, all right, this is a web server that needs to talk to this database server. So that's something that we want to allow at the agent level, but we want to block everything else.
Basically, expected behaviors set the accepted permissions from then on.
That's right. Yeah, I think we are starting to see a lot of that come out as well as part of the whole zero trust access, and I think we'll start to see some of these solutions converge. I think so. At the moment, it might be very much focused on server to server access, user to application access, but I think at some point these will merge together and make it easier to manage user to server access or user to application access even more.
Okay, well, I'm sure that means a lot more to someone much smarter than me because I am somewhat lost. But that's probably a good place to leave it. So I'll say, Masaki Takeda from the Instillery, thank you very much for joining me.
Thanks, Brandon.